Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The wind moaned through the towers of Raventree Hall, carrying with it the scent of rain and iron. Far below the battlements, the river whispered darkly beneath a veil of fog. It was near dawn when Brynden Rivers, called Bloodraven, stood alone upon the wall and watched the storm gather in the east. He was not a tall man, but there was something in his stillness that made others shrink before him. His long white hair stirred in the wind, and beneath the hood of his black cloak gleamed one red eye, the other hidden behind a patch of sable cloth. Ravens clung to the parapets around him, their beady eyes bright with a strange intelligence. They were his spies, his soldiers of the air, and they whispered secrets only he could hear. The kingdom was breaking again. In the taverns of the Trident, in the halls of old riverlords, men were speaking a forbidden name, Demon Blackfire. The rebel dragon had been dead for years, yet his sons and their banners still rose against the Iron Throne. Across the narrow sea, Bittersteel was gathering exiles and swords for hire, promising to restore the true blood of the dragon to its crown. And so the storm came once more to Westeros. Bloodraven had seen it in his dreams. The rivers turned to red, the sky full of ash, the sound of wings over burning fields. For years he had served his king as spy master, a watcher in the shadows. Now the time had come to step into the light. A rider approached through the drizzle, the black stag of House Baratheon upon his cloak. Sir Darnor Baratheon, grim-faced and soaked through, dismounted and knelt. "My lord," he said, his breath steaming, "the banners of House Blackfire have been sighted near the Trident. Bittersteel leads them. They march north with 10,000 men." Bloodraven's gaze did not waver. "And the king?" "King Aerys remains in King's Landing. He sends you command of the royal host. You are to meet the rebels at Redgrass Field, if the gods are good." The name sent a shiver through the air. Redgrass Field, the place of the first great battle, years ago, when Demon Blackfire had fallen. It was cursed ground, they said, where the earth still drank the blood of dragons. Bloodraven turned toward the mist and raised his hand. A dozen ravens took flight, their cries sharp as steel. "Then the gods are not good," he said softly, "but we will meet them there." That night the hall was filled with lords and captains. The map of the Riverlands lay open before them, the flicker of torches casting strange shadows across the parchment. Men spoke of supply lines and crossing points, of scouts lost and traitors found. But all eyes kept straying to Bloodraven. Some feared him, others hated him, few trusted him. He knew their thoughts. They whispered that he consorted with sorcery, that his mother had been a witch from Lys, that the red eye beneath his patch could see through walls and dreams alike. He gave them neither denial nor comfort. The truth was simpler. He had seen too much to look away. When the council was done, he lingered alone. From his pocket, he drew a black feather, smooth and gleaming, and set it upon the map beside the mark of the Trident. "Fly ahead," he murmured. "Find the truth for me." Outside, thunder rolled. The ravens rose again, black against the lightning, and vanished into the storm. Days later, the royal host rode forth, 3,000 men bearing the dragon banners of Aerys Targaryen. The rain did not cease. It fell in sheets, soaking mail and leather, turning roads to rivers of mud. But Bloodraven rode at the head, his pale hair a ghostly light amid the gloom. At night, they camped beneath dripping oaks, the men muttering prayers to old gods and new. Fires hissed in the rain. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled. One evening, as the mist settled thick as wool, a shadow moved beyond the firelight. The guards called out, blades drawn, but it was only a messenger, a boy no older than 15, his face pale with cold. "My lord," he gasped, "the rebels, they've crossed the Trident. Bitter Steel rides with them." Bloodraven took the sealed scroll the boy offered. The wax bore the mark of a dragon coiled about a sword, the Blackfire sigil. Inside, the message was short. "Brother, the time has come to finish what was begun at Red Grass Field. Meet me where the grass grows red once more." The writing was in Bitter Steel's own hand. Bloodraven folded the parchment carefully, his expression unreadable. Around him, the firelight seemed to dim. The rain grew heavier, and the wind carried a faint whisper through the trees. One of the captains, a young knight from House Derry, spoke hesitantly. "My lord, will you answer him?" Bloodraven looked into the flames. "Aye," he said at last. "Every debt must be paid." The next morning, before dawn, he mounted his horse and turned north. The ravens followed in a black cloud above, circling against the gray sky. Ahead lay the rivers and the blood-soaked fields where brother would face brother again. And in the silence before the first horn sounded, Bloodraven thought he heard a whisper, not from man or beast, but from the deep earth itself. It said only this: "The throne is never won, it is taken," and so began the road to it. The dawn broke pale and thin, like a blade drawn from a sheath of mist. The royal host wound its way northward along the river road, banners hanging heavy with rain. Men rode in silence, their armor dulled, their eyes wary of every shadow among the trees. For 3 days, they had marched beneath low skies and whispering winds, and already the weight of dread pressed upon them. Bloodraven rode at their head upon a gray destrier, his black cloak dragging through the mud. The crimson eye upon his pale face gleamed faintly beneath his hood, though the light was dim and shifting. His thoughts were far ahead, beyond the fog, beyond the forest, where Bittersteel's banners marched. Each night he dreamed of ravens, thousands of them, blacker than midnight, rising from fields of red grass and storm clouds. In their midst stood a single man, armored in shadow, holding aloft a sword of flame. But when Bloodraven drew nearer in the dream, the man turned, and he saw that the figure's face was his own. On the 4th day, they came upon the ruins of an old holdfast, long abandoned since the wars. The gates hung broken, ivy thick upon the walls. Within the courtyard, they found the remains of a feast, bones gnawed bare, the embers of a fire still warm. Tracks led away northward, too many to count. "The rebels are close," Sir Darner Baratheon muttered, kneeling to study the prince. 2 days, perhaps less. Bloodraven dismounted and knelt beside him. He touched the muddy earth with his gloved hand, feeling its chill seep into his skin. "They travel fast," he said. "Bitter Steel means to strike before we are ready." He rose and turned to the men. "We will camp here. The ground gives us walls, and the gods give us time enough for rest. Post sentries at every gate and tower. None enters or leaves without my word." The men obeyed, though unease rippled through the camp. The place was ill-favored, the kind of ruin that holds its breath at night. Even the horses stamped and snorted nervously, their eyes rolling at shadows that seemed to move. When darkness fell, Bloodraven sat alone in what had once been the great hall. The firelight wavered across the broken stones. His armor lay beside him, cleaned and polished, though the steel was scarred from many battles. He traced one of the dents with a finger. The wound had been struck by his brother's blade at Red Grass Field. He remembered the moment well, the flash of silver, the smell of blood and grass and fear. A soft fluttering stirred above him. One of his ravens had come to perch upon a fallen beam. Its eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Speak," Bloodraven whispered. The bird croaked once, then again, its head jerking toward the north. "So soon?" he murmured. I know. He is coming." Before dawn, the horn sounded. The watchman on the tower cried out that riders approached, swift and silent, their cloaks black as coal. Bloodraven was already awake. He stepped from the hall fully armed, his pale hair bound back, the sword at his side gleaming faintly blue in the early light. When the riders drew near, the men reached for their weapons, but Bloodraven raised his hand. "Hold," he said. "They are ours." From among the riders dismounted a woman clad in mail, her face half hidden by a helm shaped like a raven's beak. She removed it slowly, revealing dark eyes and a streak of white in her hair. "Lady Shiera," said Darner, bowing his head. "Shiera Seastar," Bloodraven greeted her quietly. "I had not thought to see you on this field." She smiled faintly. "You think I would stay in King's Landing while my blood rides to war?" Her voice was soft as silk, but there was iron beneath. "The king sent me with a message, and with 50 men to serve you." She handed him a sealed scroll, its wax marked with the royal dragon. He broke it open and read. King Aerys commanded him to bring the rebellion to an end, utterly and without mercy. "The crown cannot afford another wound," the letter said. "Do what must be done." Bloodraven folded the parchment and tucked it into his belt. "So be it," he said. That night, while the camp slept, he and Shiera stood together upon the battlements. The moon was veiled, the air sharp with the promise of frost. "You dream again," she said softly. He did not answer. "You see his face, don't you?" At that, he turned to her. "Every night," he admitted. "And every night I wonder if I will have the strength to strike him down when the hour comes." "You have always had strength enough for both of you," she said, "but you paid dearly for it." He studied her face, beautiful still, but touched by shadows. They had loved once, long ago, before the world turned bitter. Now only memory lay between them, and duty. "Whatever comes," he said, "the realm must survive. That is all that matters." "The realm," she echoed, her voice heavy. "And what of your soul, Brynden?" But he did not answer her. When dawn broke once more, they rode. The river mists clung to their cloaks, and the ravens wheeled above like black omens. Scouts brought word by mid-morning. Bittersteel's host was less than a day ahead. They had taken the high ground overlooking the Trident, waiting. Bloodraven ordered his men to halt upon a ridge from which they could see the rebel banners fluttering faintly through the fog. Swords crossed beneath a dragon's wings, black on scarlet. His red eye burned brighter. "Form the lines," he commanded. "We march at noon." The trumpets sounded, shields were locked, spears raised, and the host of the crown advanced through the mist. The air was thick with the scent of rain and iron. Then came the sound of drums, slow at first, then rising like thunder. Across the field, Bittersteel's army surged forward, a tide of steel and horsemen. In their midst rode Igor Rivers, the bastard of the same blood, his black hair flying, his blade blazing with the light of dawn. For a heartbeat, the brothers saw one another across the chaos. No words passed between them. None were needed. The earth shook as the armies met. Steel clashed, arrows screamed through the air, and the sky filled with crows. In that moment, Brynden Rivers ceased to be the king's hand or the realm's spy master. He was simply a man, a brother, and a blade drawn in the storm, and the field before him turned red once more. The rain had ceased by midday, leaving the sky bruised and heavy with smoke. Across the Trident, the armies had met in a crash of steel and fury. Spears splintered, banners fell, and the shouts of men rose to mingle with the screams of horses. The ground beneath them turned to a mire of blood and clay, and still the fighting raged. Bloodraven rode through the storm of battle as though born to it. His black cloak streamed behind him, torn by the wind. His sword flashed like lightning, every stroke measured, deliberate, and merciless. Around him his guard fought like men possessed, knights of the crown, grim-faced and silent, holding the line as the rebel tide pressed against them. The enemy banners swarmed closer. The black dragon on red, the mark of Blackfire. Bittersteel's riders crashed into the center with a roar, their lances shattering shields, their blades wet with the lifeblood of king's men. Bloodraven's destrier reared as a spear glanced off its flank. He cut the weapon aside and struck down its bearer with a clean stroke to the neck. His one good eye scanned the chaos for the banner of his brother, the winged sword of Bittersteel. He saw it then, rising and falling amid the smoke, drawing nearer with every heartbeat. "Sound the horns," he cried. "Press them back. The center holds." The air shuddered with the blast. His ravens wheeled overhead, their harsh cries echoing the horns. To many among the rebels, it seemed as if the very storm obeyed him, for where Bloodraven rode, black wings followed, blotting out the sun. By mid-afternoon, the field was a graveyard. Bodies lay strewn across the churned red earth. Banners burned, their silk curling in the heat of torches. Yet still, Bittersteel's men did not yield. From the east they came again, a wedge of horsemen clad in black and crimson, led by Igor Rivers himself. Bittersteel was taller than his brother, broad-shouldered and fierce, his long hair streaming behind him as he rode. His sword was Blackfire, the blade once wielded by Demon, their father's bastard son and would-be king. It shone with a cruel light as he lifted it high. "Brynden!" Bittersteel roared across the din. "Bastard of shadows, come and face me." Bloodraven turned his horse and spurred forward, cutting through the press of men. When the brothers met, the clash of their blades rang out above all other sound. Steel bit steel, sparks flying. Bittersteel's strength was like a hammer's blow, driving him back step by step. But Bloodraven fought with patience, every parry precise, his red eye fixed upon the other's face. The world around them seemed to fade. No battle, no thunder, only the two of them, locked in a dance older than crowns. "You should have knelt to Demon," Bittersteel spat, swinging low. "You should have stood with your kin." "I stood with the realm," Bloodraven answered, turning the blade aside. "And I stand with it still." They broke apart, circling. The mud sucked at their boots, and the wind carried the stench of blood. Bittersteel's laughter was harsh and wild. "The realm. You speak of loyalty as if it were yours to command. Look at you, a kinslayer, a sorcerer, a monster wrapped in the king's colors." Bloodraven's face did not change, but his voice was quiet and terrible. "Better a monster who serves than a man who betrays." Bittersteel lunged. Their swords met once more, the force of it ringing in their arms. Bloodraven felt the weight of every choice he had made, every shadow he had embraced. The raven screamed above them. A stroke glanced off his shoulder plate, tearing metal. He countered, his own blade cutting through Bittersteel's guard to score his arm. Blood welled, dark and bright. For a heartbeat, Aegor faltered. Then a horn blew from the ridge. From the west, the royal reserve charged, 1,000 riders under Ser Darner Baratheon slamming into the rebel flank. The tide began to turn. Men fled, trampled by their own. The cry went up that the Blackfire host was breaking. But Bittersteel did not yield. His eyes blazed with hatred. "This isn't over, Brynden," he hissed, parrying another blow. "The dragon's blood will burn long after your bones have turned to dust." He drove forward, and their swords locked. For a moment, they struggled, faces inches apart. Then Bloodraven's free hand struck out, seizing the dagger at his belt. He drove it upward beneath his brother's arm, between the plates of armor. Bittersteel's breath left him in a hiss. His eyes went wide. Bloodraven wrenched the dagger free, and his brother toppled from the saddle, crashing to the ground. The din of battle rolled on around them. Bloodraven dismounted and stood over him. Bittersteel still breathed, though blood pooled beneath him. The black sword lay at his side. "Finish it," he whispered hoarsely. "End what you began." Bloodraven looked down at him. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he knelt and closed his brother's hand around the hilt of Blackfire. "No," he said quietly. "The gods will judge you, not I." He rose, turning away as the royal banners advanced through the smoke. Behind him, Bittersteel's men carried their wounded commander from the field. None could say whether he lived or died that day, for by dusk, the rain had returned and washed the blood from the grass. When the battle ended, the trident ran red again. Thousands lay dead, brothers, fathers, sons. The king's banners flew victorious, but the cost was heavy. The men called it the Second Redgrass Field, and the name would not be forgotten. That night, as campfires burned upon the wet plain, Bloodraven sat alone beside the river. His armor was dented, his hands stained crimson to the wrist. The ravens perched around him in silence. Across the water, the moon rose pale and thin through torn clouds. Shiera found him there, her face streaked with soot and tears. "It's done," she said softly. "The realm is safe." "Safe," he echoed, though the word tasted bitter. "How many times must we save it before there's nothing left worth saving?" She knelt beside him, touching his hand. "You did what you had to do. You always do." He stared into the dark water. For an instant, he thought he saw his reflection, the red eye glowing back at him, but not as his own. It seemed older, colder, watching from beneath the surface like something that had always been there, waiting. He looked away. "Tell the men to burn the dead," he said. "All of them, rebels and loyalists alike. Let no crow feast on what was once a man." When she left him, he remained by the river until the fires were nothing but distant stars upon the plain. The ravens took flight, one by one, into the night. The war was ended, but the peace that followed would be darker still. For though the blood had dried upon the fields, it had not yet dried upon Brynden River's hands. And far to the north, beyond the wall, a whisper moved through the ancient woods, a voice older than kings, older than thrones, calling softly through the roots of the earth. It called his name. Morning came pale and thin upon the field of the dead. A gray mist crept over the plain, soft as a shroud, hiding the ruin beneath its folds. Where men had fought and fallen, only silence remained, the heavy, dreadful silence of victory. The air smelled of rain, ash, and the faint iron tang of old blood. Bloodraven walked among the corpses as the sun tried and failed to pierce the fog. Around him, the royal men-at-arms gathered the fallen and laid them in long rows for the pyres. The crows had already begun their feast. Some of the dead still clutched swords in their stiffening hands, as if unwilling to yield even in death. He paused beside one, a boy no older than 16, wearing a rebel surcoat. The youth's eyes were open to the sky, his lips parted as though he would speak. Bloodraven knelt and closed them with 2 fingers. Too young, he thought, but then they always were. A captain approached, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek. "My lord," he said softly, "the pyres are ready. Shall we light them?" Bloodraven looked over the plain. "All of them," he said, "rebel and loyalist alike. The river will remember no banners today." The captain hesitated. "Some of the lords might take offense, my lord. Burning their kin beside traitors. Then they may curse me from their graves," Bloodraven replied. "Do as I command." When the torches were set, the flames spread like a slow tide. Smoke coiled upward, black against the silver dawn. The men watched in silence, the heat prickling their faces. Bloodraven stood alone, his crimson eye gleaming faintly through the haze. As the fire consumed the dead, a raven settled upon his shoulder. It croaked once, harsh and low. He did not startle. "Yes," he murmured. "I know. It is done." Later, when the ashes cooled and the men rested, a rider came from the south, mud-splattered, breathless, and pale with fear. He knelt before Bloodraven and held out a sealed letter. "From King's Landing, my lord. Urgent." Bloodraven broke the seal and read. The parchment bore the mark of the hand, and the words within were sharp as a dagger. "Return to the capital at once. The king demands your counsel. Shadows gather in the Red Keep, and the realm whispers your name." He folded the letter slowly. The meaning was plain enough. In victory, men had begun to fear him more than they feared the foe. That night, before he left the field, he sought out Bittersteel's body, but found none. Only a patch of trampled grass and a few drops of dried blood where he had fallen. "Gone," said Shiera, who stood beside him in the mist. Her cloak was black, her face pale beneath the hood. His men carried him away before the pyres were lit. Bloodraven's gaze lingered upon the ground. If he lives, he will return. Hatred does not die easily. "And if he's dead?" she asked. "Then his ghost will ride beside me all the same." She touched his arm lightly. "Come away, the king calls, and the crows have had their fill." By the time they reached King's Landing, weeks had passed, and the realm was already reshaping the tale. The small folk spoke of ravens blotting out the sun, of Bittersteel fleeing before a storm of black wings. Songs were sung of Bloodraven the sorcerer, half man and half shadow, who slew 1,000 rebels with a glance of his red eye. The truth mattered little. In the Red Keep, truth was a blade honed to serve power, and whispers were its sheath. The city stank of smoke and rain when Bloodraven rode through its gates. The people bowed, but few dared meet his eye. At the foot of the Tower of the Hand, Sir Darner met him with grim news. "The king waits in the council chamber," he said. "But the court has changed, my lord. The whispers turn against you." Bloodraven dismounted without a word. His cloak, still stained from the field, trailed across the marble floor as he entered the Red Keep. The hall of the council was lit by torches, though it felt colder than the grave. King Aerysthafari sat at the table's head, pale and wan beneath his silver hair. Around him gathered the lords of the realm, each wearing the mask of courtesy, each hiding a knife behind his smile. "Brynden Rivers," the king said softly as he entered, "you have returned." "My liege." Bloodraven bowed low. "The rebellion is ended. Bittersteel's host lies broken. The throne is secure." A murmur rippled through the lords. Some bowed their heads in approval, others watched in silence, their eyes sharp as hawks. "Secure," said Lord Peake from the far end of the table. "Aye, secure, but at what cost? Thousands dead, villages burned, the trident black with ash. The small folk call you the White Devil, my lord. They say the crows feast better than the crown." Bloodraven's gaze met his, cool and unflinching. "The crows feast because the realm still stands. Would you rather feed them your own bones, my lord?" A tense silence followed. The king raised his hand. "Enough. The realm is weary of blood. I would see peace restored." His voice was thin, uncertain. "Brynden, you have served me well, yet some question whether your methods are fitting for peace." "I serve the realm," Bloodraven said evenly. "I use the tools the realm provides." "Dark tools," murmured Lord Peake. "Black arts, spies, whispers, sorcery. Is it loyalty or fear that keeps the king upon his throne?" Bloodraven smiled faintly. "Whichever holds longer." That answer did not please them, yet no one dared speak again. The king dismissed the council soon after, leaving only Brynden and Shira in the empty hall. She watched him as he stood by the tall windows, staring out over the city. The rain had begun to fall again, thin and relentless. "They will never love you," she said quietly. "I do not ask them to," he replied. "Let them hate me if it keeps them safe." "Safe?" She shook her head. "You think safety grows from fear? You build walls around yourself so high that even light cannot reach you." He turned to her. "Better a wall than a grave." She said nothing. When she left him, Bloodraven lingered by the window. Far below, he could see the black shapes of ravens wheeling over the city rooftops. They seemed to form a great circle, ever turning, ever watching. He thought of Bittersteel, of the field of ashes, of the letter from the king's own hand. "Shadows gather," it had said. Shadows indeed. They gathered everywhere he went. And in their midst, he felt the faintest pull. Something beyond the walls, beyond the crown, waiting in the cold lands of the north. It was not yet a summons. Not yet. But one day, he knew, the voice that whispered through the roots of the world would grow stronger. And when it called, Brynden Rivers would answer. The days that followed were filled with unrest. Though the rebellion was broken, the realm did not heal. From the crownlands to the reach, old wounds festered in silence. Lords who had bent the knee whispered of betrayal, of vengeance yet to come. Ravens flew day and night from the Red Keep, their wings blackening the skies above the city. Each carried tidings that only Bloodraven could read. Within the Tower of the Hand, the king's spy master worked as tirelessly as the crows that served him. His chambers were cluttered with maps and scrolls, candles burning low over parchment covered in his tight, angular script. At all hours he could be found there, pacing between tables, listening to reports brought by hooded men. "The Reach stirs," one of his informants said, a lean fellow with a scar down his nose. "Lord Peake has sent word to the exiles across the narrow sea. He means to bring Bittersteel back, if he yet lives." Bloodraven did not look up from the scroll he was reading. "He lives," he said. "Hatred such as his does not die easily. Keep watching. The next raven flies at dawn." When the man had gone, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. The candlelight made his pale hair gleam like silver thread. His single red eye flickered as it caught the flame. "How many wars must I fight?" he thought. "How many times must I save a realm that cannot save itself?" The door opened quietly. Shiera Seastar entered without a word, her cloak drawn close about her shoulders. In her hands she carried a small chest of carved ebony. "From the king," she said, "a token of gratitude." Bloodraven lifted the lid. Inside lay a circlet of gold, plain but heavy, set with a single ruby that burned like an ember. "The king would see me wear this?" he asked. "He says it is a mark of honor," Shira replied, "but the court sees it differently. They call it the crown of crows." He smiled thinly. "A crown of crows suits me better than one of flowers." "You should leave this place," she said after a moment. "Take what you've won and go. The court will never forgive you. They fear you, Brynden. Sooner or later, they will move against you." He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "And abandon the throne to fools and flatterers? No, the realm still needs a steady hand, even a hated one." "Then you will die for it," she said softly. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but I will not flee from the task the gods set me." Shira sighed and turned to the window. Beyond the glass, the city stretched dark and restless, its towers and alleys veiled in mist. "I dream of the sea," she said, "of Lys and the gardens my mother spoke of. When I wake, I can still smell the salt." "You were born for sunlight, not shadows," he said quietly. "And you?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "What were you born for, Brynden?" He did not answer. In the weeks that followed, rumors thickened like fog. Some said Bloodraven had grown too powerful, that he ruled the king with whispers and visions. Others claimed he consorted with the old gods, that the weirwoods themselves bent their branches toward him when he passed. The great lords began to avoid the Tower of the Hand. Only the ravens came freely now, perching upon his windowsills, leaving black feathers upon the stone. One night, as he worked by candlelight, a knock came upon his door. It was Sir Darnor Baratheon, helm in hand, his face grim. "My lord," he said, "the king summons you to the throne room." "At this hour?" Bloodraven asked. "The council meets in secret," Darnor replied. "They say it concerns your conduct during the war." Bloodraven rose slowly, setting aside his quill. "So," he murmured, "the hour has come." The throne room was dim when he entered, lit only by torches that threw long shadows across the hall. King Aerys sat upon the iron throne, thin and ghost-like beneath the crown. Around him gathered the small council, Lords Peak, Hightower, and Staunton among them. "Brynden Rivers," the king said, his voice echoing hollowly through the hall. "You stand accused of exceeding my command, of executing men without trial, of using sorcery against the king's enemies. How do you answer these charges?" Bloodraven stepped forward. "I answer them with truth. Every man I struck down bore arms against you. Every whisper I used, every spell I cast, served your throne. The realm is safe because I was willing to do what others would not." Lord Peak rose from his seat. "Safe?" he said sharply. "You sow fear, not safety. You've turned the court into a nest of spies and shadows. Even now, your ravens watch us from the windows." "They watch because none here can be trusted," Bloodraven said. His red eye glimmered in the torchlight. "Least of all you, Lord Peak." Peak's face darkened. "You dare?" "Enough," the king said wearily. "Brynden, your service has been long and faithful, but the realm grows weary of blood. I have decided that you will be relieved of your office. Henceforth, you shall take the black and serve at the wall." The words fell like a stone into the silence. Bloodraven bowed his head slightly. "As my king commands," he said. Peak smiled thinly, triumphant. "The realm will rest easier without your shadow over it." Bloodraven's gaze flicked toward him. "Shadows are not so easily banished, my lord. Some are born from the deeds of men, and those linger long after the torches burn out." He turned and strode from the hall. The great doors shut behind him with a sound like thunder. That night, Shira found him in his chamber, standing before the window as the rain drummed upon the glass. "So it's true," she said. "It is," he he answered. "The wall awaits." She came closer. "You could flee, cross the narrow sea. There are ships waiting in the harbor." "No," he said. "My fate lies north, not east. I have seen it in dreams. The realm's battles are not ended. They are only changing shape." She looked at him a long while. Then wordlessly, she reached into her cloak and drew forth a small vial, the liquid within glimmering darkly. "For your wounds," she said. "It will dull the pain." He took it and smiled faintly. "Pain reminds me that I yet live." "Will you ever return?" she asked. "I will go where the ravens lead," he said simply. The next morning, he rode from the city with a small escort. The gates closed behind him, and the people whispered as he passed. Some spat at his shadow, others crossed themselves. But when he was gone, the city seemed smaller somehow, as though the walls themselves had drawn closer. At the edge of the northern road, a single raven flew above him, circling once before turning toward the gray horizon. Bloodraven followed without looking back. Ahead lay the wall, the frozen edge of the world, and beyond it, his destiny. The wind was a living thing on the King's Road that winter, cold, sharp, and hungry. It scoured the land bare and drove gray clouds before it like herds of frightened beasts. Bloodraven rode north with a small escort of black-cloaked men, the first of his brothers from the Night's Watch come to receive him. They spoke little on the journey. Even the horses seemed subdued, their breath pluming white in the air as the forests of the north closed around them. Each night they made camp beneath the gnarled boughs of ancient oaks, their fires burning low to spare the fuel. The north was a place of long silences, and Bloodraven found himself listening to them. The crackle of frost, the far cry of wolves, the whisper of branches that seemed to speak in tongues older than men. He had thought he knew the voice of the wind, but this was something else entirely. This was the voice of the earth itself. They passed through towns where the people stared as he went by. Some bowed, others crossed themselves, muttering prayers under their breath. To them, he was no longer a lord or knight, but a half-remembered legend, a shadow of the old wars. Children whispered that his single red eye could see the sins of a man's heart. When he looked upon them, they hid their faces. Once, as they crossed a frozen ford, one of the Black brothers, an old ranger named Malor, rode beside him. "I remember the tales of you, Lord Rivers," he said. "Some call you hero, others call you curse. Which would you say is true?" Bloodraven's pale hair blew across his face as he answered. "Both, perhaps. A curse to those who needed one, and a hero to those who deserved it." Malor gave a grim chuckle. "A fair answer. But the wall has little use for heroes or curses. It only needs men." "I have been many things," Bloodraven said quietly. "A man is one of them still." They rode on through days of snow and silence. At last the wall appeared before them, vast and white beneath a leaden sky. It rose from the earth like a mountain forged of glass, its surface shining with a light that was not of the sun. Bloodraven drew rein, staring up at it, feeling the chill settle into his bones. So this was the end of his road, the edge of the world, where the realm of men yielded to the cold eternity beyond. The ravens that had followed him from the south circled overhead, their cries sharp against the wind. At Castle Black, the Lord Commander received him with solemn courtesy. "Brynden Rivers," said the man, a tall, grave figure with frost in his beard. "By order of the king, you are come to take the Black and serve upon the wall. Have you any last words as a lord of the realm?" Bloodraven dismounted, his boots sinking into the snow. "None," he said. I have spoken enough for one lifetime." The ceremony was brief. Beneath the godswood, before a heart tree whose face was worn by time, he knelt and spoke the vows. "Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death." The words came easily to his lips, as if they had waited there for years. When he rose, he felt no sorrow, no sense of loss, only a strange calm, like the stillness before a storm. That night, as the brothers of the watch feasted in his honor, he sat apart, watching the snow drift against the walls. The hall was full of laughter and the smell of roasting meat, yet he could not taste it. The noise seemed to fade, replaced by the faint rustling of the wind outside. He rose and stepped into the cold. The wall loomed above him, its surface gleaming faintly in the starlight. He could see his reflection there, a pale figure with one red eye and a face half shadow, half scar. For the first time in many years he smiled. "Do you see it too?" came a voice behind him. It was Malor again, his beard crusted with frost. "The wall," Bloodraven said. "It watches as much as it guards." Malor nodded slowly. "Aye. Some say it remembers. Others say it dreams. I wonder which is worse." Bloodraven turned his gaze northward, toward the endless white beyond. "Dreams and memories are one and the same," he murmured. "They wait for the waking." Weeks passed. Winter deepened, and the wall swallowed him into its rhythm. The endless watches, the harsh wind that never slept, the cold that gnawed at bone and soul alike. Yet Bloodraven found a strange peace in the monotony. The court's whispers could not reach him here. The games of lords and kings were far behind. Still, his ravens came and went, their wings black against the snow. They perched upon the ramparts and upon his shoulder, bringing him secrets from the wild. Beyond the wall, they said, things stirred, old things, long sleeping. Fires had been seen in the haunted forest. Shapes moved beneath the northern lights. The rangers who returned from patrols spoke in low voices of strange sights, white shadows gliding between the trees, the dead walking where no living man dared tread. One evening, Malor came to him again. "There's talk among the men," he said. "They say you go out at night alone, into the woods, that you speak to the trees." Bloodraven's red eye gleamed faintly in the firelight. "Do they fear that? They fear what they do not understand. Then they will never cease fearing." Malor frowned. "Why go, my lord? The forest holds no peace." "On the contrary," Bloodraven said softly, "it holds every peace that ever was." That night, he rode alone into the woods beyond the wall. The moon hung low, and the snow glittered beneath it like scattered glass. The trees grew thick and ancient, their trunks pale as bone. Among them, he found what he had sought, a weirwood older than memory, its roots spreading like veins through the frozen ground. He dismounted and knelt before it. The carved face upon its trunk seemed almost to watch him, its eyes pools of red sap. "Do you remember me?" he whispered. The wind sighed through the branches, and in that sound he thought he heard words, not in the tongue of men, but in something older, deeper. "We remember all who serve." A shiver passed through him, though the air was still. He touched the bark, and for an instant the world fell away. He saw flashes, visions of snow and blood, of ravens circling a tower of ice, of a dark shape moving through the storm. When the vision faded, he found himself kneeling in the snow, his breath ragged. He rose slowly. The trees around him seemed to lean closer, their branches whispering secrets only he could hear. "Very well," he said quietly. "I will serve." He turned back toward the wall. Above him, the ravens took flight, their wings a living tide against the pale sky. Far beyond the forest, unseen by mortal eyes, something ancient stirred. And in the heart of winter, the last true Targaryen of the old blood took his first step toward the fate the gods had written for him in the roots of the world. The years passed upon the wall like the slow carving of ice by water, silent, steady, and without end. Brynden Rivers, once Bloodraven, Lord of Whispers, Hand of the King, and kinsman to dragons, was now but one black-cloaked shadow among many. Yet there was no mistaking him, even beneath the frost and snow. The ravens still followed him wherever he went, and the red gleam of his single eye burned in the darkness like a coal that refused to die. He served as the Watch served, without rest, without glory. He led patrols into the forest, saw to the training of new recruits, and dispensed justice when quarrels rose among the brothers. His rule was fair, but cold. The men respected him, feared him, whispered that he could see through their lies. None dared challenge his word. Years turned to decades. Kings rose and fell far to the south, yet the wall endured, and Bloodraven endured with it. His hair grew whiter, his face thinner, his frame stooped, but the fire within him never dimmed. Then one bitter winter, when the sun hid itself for weeks behind clouds, word came of a ranger company lost beyond the frost fangs. Bloodraven, now Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, called his captains to council. The great hall of Castle Black was cold as a tomb, its hearth a dull ember beneath the vast stone chimney. "They rode north 2 moons past," said Sir Mallor, older now, his beard gone to snow. "No word since. We sent ravens, but none returned." Bloodraven stood beside the fire, the black of his cloak melting into the shadows. "Who led them?" "Sir Gawain of the Shadow Tower," Mallor replied. "A good man." "Good men vanish as easily as bad in those woods," said another. "The wildlings are restless. Perhaps the snows took them." "Perhaps," Bloodraven murmured, "but I have seen what the snow hides." The captains fell silent. They all knew the stories, the shapes that moved in the blizzards, the dead eyes gleaming in the dark. Most called them tales, meant to frighten green boys. Bloodraven knew better. He looked to the window slit, where the storm beat against the stones. "I will go north," he said. Mallor's head snapped up. "My lord, you are too old for such a venture. Let the younger men ride." "I have lived longer than most kings," Bloodraven said, "and I will not spend the last of my years waiting for death by the hearth. I will go." And so it was decided. They rode out at dawn, Bloodraven, Mallor, and 20 rangers, their horses cloaked in frost. The gate of the wall yawned open before them, groaning like a beast in pain. Beyond lay the haunted forest, vast and white and silent. The journey was slow, for the snow fell thick and the wind cut like knives. The men wrapped their faces in wool and spoke little. Bloodraven rode at their head, his one eye fixed upon the pathless north. The ravens followed still, black against the storm-gray sky. On the 3rd day, they came upon the first sign, a fire pit buried in snow, a few blackened bones, no footprints, no tracks, as if the riders had risen and vanished into air. Mallor crouched by the ashes. "They didn't freeze," he said. "Something killed them." Bloodraven dismounted. He knelt, brushing snow aside. Beneath it, he found a broken sword and the torn remnant of a Night's Watch cloak. The fabric was stiff with frost, but there was no blood. "They were taken," he said softly. "By what?" asked Mallor. "By that which remembers us," Bloodraven murmured, and he looked north again. On the 5th night, the storm broke. They made camp in the lee of a hill, the fire small and mean. The men huddled close, their breath rising in clouds. One of them began to hum a tune, low and uncertain. It was then the first scream came. From the edge of the camp, steel rang. Men scrambled to their feet. Bloodraven was already moving, sword in hand, the ravens shrieking overhead. He reached the perimeter just in time to see a figure half hidden in the snow. A man, or what had once been a man. Its flesh was gray, its eyes pale as moonlight. Malor struck it down with his axe, and the body fell. But when he turned it over, the face that stared up from the snow was Ser Gawain's. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Bloodraven said, "Burn him." They did so, though the fire fought against the cold as if unwilling to touch the corpse. The flames hissed blue before finally taking hold. When dawn came, only ashes remained. They pressed on. The forest grew darker, the air colder. Even the ravens fell silent. By midday, they reached the foot of a frozen hill crowned with ancient trees. At its heart stood a weirwood, larger than any Bloodraven had seen. Its trunk was wide as a hall, its roots twisted through the earth like veins of bone. The face carved upon its bark was old and wise, its eyes running red with sap. The sight filled him with a strange calm. He dismounted and approached. "My lord," Malor called after him, "be wary." But Bloodraven did not stop. He laid his hand upon the weirwood's trunk, and at once the world dissolved. He saw flashes, images bright and fleeting as lightning. Armies marching beneath dragon banners, the red keep aflame, a shadow in the shape of a wolf, a boy with eyes like summer sky and hair dark as night, standing before a heart tree much like this one. Then came a voice, soft as the wind and vast as the sea. "The realm is dying. The roots remember. Come beneath and you shall see." When the vision faded, he was on his knees. The men were shouting. The ground had opened beneath the weirwood, a dark hollow leading down into the earth. Bloodraven rose, his face pale, his eyes burning. "Stay here," he commanded. "Do not follow." Malor reached for him. "My lord, what are you doing?" "What I was born to do." Without another word, he descended into the hollow. The darkness swallowed him whole. For many days the rangers waited, but he did not return. They searched the forest, found no trace. In time, they turned back toward the wall, leaving only a cairn of stones by the weirwood to mark the place. Years later, the story would spread among the Night's Watch that Lord Commander Brynden Rivers had gone into the woods and vanished, taken by the old gods or the cold. Some said he died there, his bones buried in the roots of the trees. Others whispered that he lived still, far beneath the earth, watching through the eyes of ravens and leaves alike. They called him the Lord of Shadows, but the trees knew another name. In the hollow beneath the forest, where roots twined like veins through stone, a pale figure sat upon a throne of wood. His hair was white as snow, his flesh pale as milk, and his one red eye burned faintly in the darkness. The ravens perched above him, whispering secrets, and when the wind blew through the trees above, it carried his voice with it, soft and distant, but eternal. "I am the watcher in the roots. I am the memory of men. The wall may fall, the kings may die, but I will endure." And so the tale of Bloodraven, last sorcerer of the Targaryen line, ended as all true tales of power must, not with death, but with transformation. For though his road to the throne had long since ended, his road to the world's heart had only just begun. Far beneath the roots of the haunted forest, the earth slept in silence. No sound of wind or water reached the hollow depths where Brynden Rivers had descended. The air was thick with age, with the slow pulse of living wood and the breath of forgotten time. He walked for what seemed days through tunnels of weirwood. their pale bark glowing faintly in the dark, their roots weaving together into pillars that stretched beyond sight. At last, the passage widened into a cavern vast and hollow. Its walls shimmered faintly, wet with sap that glowed red as blood. In the center grew a colossal weirwood, older and greater than all the rest. Its face was worn smooth by centuries, its eyes open and waiting. Beneath its boughs lay a throne carved from its own living roots. Bloodraven sank to one knee before it. "I am come," he said softly, "as was shown to me." From the shadows, a voice answered, ancient, whispering through the wood itself. "We have waited long, Brynden rivers. The blood of the dragon and the blood of the forest both flow in you. The time of crowns is ended. The time of roots begins." He raised his head. "What would you have of me?" "To see," the voice replied, "to remember." The roots stirred, reaching out like pale fingers. They brushed against his skin, cold as the grave. Pain flared through him, sharp as steel. The wood pierced flesh and bone alike, winding into his veins. For a heartbeat he fought it, every muscle straining. Then he felt it, an opening of the mind, a flood of memory, not his own. The world dissolved into visions. He saw the north blanketed in snow, the wall gleaming like frozen fire. He saw kings and wildlings, the rise and fall of houses long dust. He saw white shadows gliding through the dark, eyes of blue flame burning where no life should be. Then he saw farther still, beyond years, beyond death. He saw a boy climbing a tower, a direwolf by his side. He saw ravens circling a weirwood, their cries echoing through the ages, and through it all, he heard a single word, whispered again and again. Remember. When the vision faded, he was upon the throne, his body rooted in place. His veins ran with sap, his skin pale as bark. He could feel the trees above, each leaf and branch as if it were his own flesh. He could see through their eyes, hear through their roots. So began the long watch beneath the earth. Years passed above like drifting snow. Men forgot his name, as men forget all things. The watch spoke of him only in whispers. They said the ravens listened to him still, that sometimes, on moonless nights, they flew north and did not return. And north of the wall, the forest grew restless. Strange lights moved among the trees, and hunters spoke of voices in the wind. One winter, a wildling child strayed too far from her village and was lost in the storm. When she awoke, she found herself in a hollow filled with pale light. A man sat upon a throne of roots, his one red eye watching her, kind and sorrowful. "Do not be afraid," he said, though his lips did not move. "You are safe." The girl trembled. "Who are you?" "A watcher," he said, "a memory." "Are you dead?" His smile was faint. "Not yet, not entirely." The girl looked around her. The walls of the cavern shimmered with the faint glow of the weirwood's sap. "Is this the god's place?" "It is every place," he replied. "The trees remember all that ever was." "Then why do they remember me?" "Because," he said gently, "one day you will need to remember them." He raised a hand, white and thin as bone, and touched her brow. The girl felt warmth flow through her, strange and vast, as though she had looked upon the world through the eyes of the gods. When she blinked again, the cavern was gone. She lay in the snow before the gates of her village, the dawn breaking red behind her. The elders said she had wandered in the storm for 3 days, but she would not speak of what she had seen. Only once, years later, when she was old and gray, did she tell her grandchildren of the pale man in the tree who had spoken without words. Time beneath the roots did not flow as it did in the world above. The seasons turned, but to Bloodraven They were one long breath. He saw through the eyes of the trees as the world changed. Wars and peace, birth and ruin, the slow dying of old magic. Yet through all of it, he waited. Sometimes in dreams he spoke with the voice that had greeted him when first he came. "The world forgets," the voice would say. "Even the wall forgets. But we must remember." "I remember too much," he would answer. "Then teach another to remember for you." He did not yet know what that meant. Once, during a summer long past, he saw through the eyes of a raven a boy in Winterfell. Young, dark-haired, quick of wit. The boy ran with wolves, climbed where none dared climb. When the boy fell, the old roots shuddered, and Bloodraven knew. "Him," whispered the trees, "he will come." From that day forth, he watched the boy. He sent dreams of flight and wings, of shadows and snow. He whispered through the leaves, through the cries of ravens. Years passed. The boy became a cripple, then a seer, then a wanderer of dreams. Through him, the world began to stir again. And Bloodraven waited, patient as the roots that bound him. At last, one winter morning unlike any other, he felt a stirring in the forest above. The snow fell heavier than before, yet beneath its weight came footsteps, soft, uncertain, but steady. A boy approached the weirwood hollow, guided by a great black wolf and a girl whose eyes were sad and strong. Bloodraven felt the pulse of destiny quicken in the earth. "So it begins," whispered the trees. He opened his eyes, eyes that had not opened in 100 years, and the red light within them burned bright as dawn. When the boy entered the cavern and looked upon him, Bloodraven smiled for the first time in an age. "I have been watching you," he said, his voice a whisper through the leaves. "All your life I have watched. You have come a long way, Brandon Stark." The boy's eyes were wide. "Are you the three-eyed crow?" Bloodraven's pale lips curved faintly. "A crow I was, and more. Now I am only what remains when the last crow falls. You will be the rest." Bran hesitated. "Why me?" "Because you were born to see," Bloodraven said, "as I once did, as the world must again." The boy came closer, his torchlight glimmering upon the pale roots. "Will I walk again?" he asked. Bloodraven's red eye shone like a star in the dark. "No, but you will fly." And so, in the hollow beneath the world, the old blood met the new. The last Targaryen of shadow and the last Stark of winter joined their fates beneath the roots of the same ancient tree. Outside, the wind rose, carrying the cries of 1,000 ravens into the darkening sky. Winter had come, but so too had memory, and with it the promise of a world that would not forget. Deep beneath the roots, time was a river that no longer flowed. Days and years mingled as one in the still air of that cavern where the living met the memory of the earth. Brynden Rivers, once Bloodraven, now the Pale Watcher, sat motionless upon his throne of roots, and yet his mind wandered farther than any ship had sailed. He watched the snows fall across the world of men, the flames rise in the south, and the shadows gather beyond the wall. The boy Bran Stark had come to him, just as the whispers of the trees had foretold. In him burned the wild curiosity of youth and the sorrow of one who had seen too much loss. Beside him were Mira Reed, strong and steadfast, and her silent brother Jojen, whose green dreams were growing fainter with every dawn. Bloodraven had watched over many in his time, but none had awakened the old fire in him as this boy did. Bran was not yet wise, nor strong, but he had a courage born not of pride, but of wonder. For many days they lingered beneath the weirwood's roots. The air was cool and damp, smelling of moss and ancient sap. The ravens perched among the branches, muttering in their sleep. Bran would sit cross-legged before the throne, gazing at the old man's pale face and wondering if he breathed at all. One day, the boy asked, "Are you still alive?" Bloodraven's lips curved faintly. "Alive enough to remember," he said, "but you don't move." "Do the mountains move?" Bloodraven asked. "They watch, they endure, and in their stillness lies their strength. So it is with me. I have no need of feet to walk the world. The trees carry my sight farther than any road." Bran frowned, gazing at the weirwood roots that coiled around the old man's legs like serpents. "Can you see my home? Can you see Winterfell?" "I see it," Bloodraven whispered, his red eye flickering with distant fire. "I see the towers rising proud once more, and the hearths burning warm. Yet I also see the snows upon its walls, and the wolves that walk within." Bran leaned forward eagerly. "My brothers, my sisters." The old man's expression did not change, but his voice softened. "All things are in the roots of the world, child. You will find them there, if you learn how to look." And so began Bran's lessons. The days that followed were full of shadows and dreams. Bloodraven taught the boy how to open his mind to the whispers of the trees, to feel the slow heartbeat of the earth beneath the frost. "Each tree is a memory," he told him. "Each leaf, a page of the world's book. The weirwoods remember everything that has ever been touched by their roots. The first songs, the first kings, the first murders done beneath their boughs." At first, Bran could see only flashes, faces in the bark, voices carried on the wind. But under Bloodraven's guidance, the visions grew clearer. He saw his father, Lord Eddard, praying beneath the heart tree at Winterfell. He saw Robb crowned king in the north. He saw his mother's tears fall into the cold water of the river. Each time he returned to himself, trembling and pale, Bloodraven would nod. "You are learning to walk among the roots. One day, you will not only walk, you will fly." "But I don't want to see everything," Bran said once, his voice small. "Some of it hurts." The old man's expression was sorrowful. "All knowledge hurts, Bran. The question is not whether you can bear it, but whether the world can bear you knowing it." Winter outside thickened into something more than a season. Even from beneath the earth, Bloodraven felt it. The long cold creeping southward, the growing restlessness beyond the wall. The dead were moving. The trees whispered of pale riders gliding through the snow, of villages found silent, of the fire in men's hearts burning low. When he closed his eyes, he saw them, the white walkers, cold as moonlight, leading their armies of the slain. Once, he had thought the wall eternal. Now he knew better. All things built by men must fall in the end. He watched through Raven's eyes as the Black Brothers dwindled, as fear spread among the wildlings, as the world forgot the promise of spring. Yet amid the dread, there was one glimmer of hope, the boy before him. "You are the seed of the last green," Bloodraven told Bran one night as they sat before the pale fire that glowed within the cavern. "When the snows cover all, when fire and shadow war for the world, your sight will guide what remains of men. You will not fight with steel or crown, but with memory." Bran's eyes were wide. Memory? What good is that against an army? "Ask the dead," Bloodraven said. "They are what happens when memory fails." Mira Reed tended to Bran while he learned, keeping the fire and hunting for what little food the forest offered. But the winter was cruel, and the cavern colder with every passing moon. One night she said quietly to Bloodraven, "He's just a boy. You ask too much of him." The old man turned his head, and the dim light caught the crimson gleam of his eye. "The world will ask more," he said. "Better he learn its weight now." Mira lowered her gaze. And what of you? You've been here so long, you've forgotten the feel of sunlight. I have not forgotten, he murmured. I have surrendered it. The fire of men burns too swiftly for one such as me. She said no more, but her eyes were full of pity. Seasons turned. Jojen faded, his dreams spent, his life a whisper. Mira buried him beneath the snow, and Bran wept for the first time since leaving home. Afterward, Bloodraven said, Now you have seen the truth of the green dreams. They show us what must come, not what we would choose. Bran asked, Will it ever end? The wars, the deaths, the winter? Bloodraven's pale fingers brushed the arm of his throne. Nothing ends. All things become part of the song. What fades from one verse begins anew in another. So it has always been. He looked at the boy with something almost like pride. One day, when I am gone, you will sit where I sit. You will see as I see. And when the last storm comes, you will know what must be done. Bran stared at the roots coiling around the old man's body, the pale bark that had begun to claim his flesh. I don't want to be like you, he whispered. Bloodraven smiled faintly. Then be better. As the moons waned, the forest above grew darker. The wind howled through the trees, and the ravens' cries filled the air. Bloodraven felt the end drawing near, not just his own, but that of the age of men. Yet he did not despair. He had seen this moment before, 1,000 times in 1,000 visions. In the end, memory would not die. It would take root in the boy who sat before him, the last spark of green in a world turning to white. When the storm came, it was not with thunder, but with silence. Snow drifted down through the mouth of the cave, soft and endless. The fire burned low. Bloodraven's voice was barely a whisper now. Remember, Bran, the trees remember everything. When I am gone, do not look for me among the living. Look for me in the leaves. The boy reached for his hand, but it was already still, cold as the wood that had claimed him. The ravens cried once more and took flight into the night. And as the last ember faded, Bran Stark sat alone beneath the earth, listening to the pulse of the roots, feeling the heartbeat of the world. Above, the snows fell thicker. The long night was coming, but in the depths below, a single memory endured, bright, unbroken, and waiting. The snows outside the cave lay deep and undisturbed, blanketing the land in silence. The world above was asleep beneath winter's heavy hand, and only the wind gave voice to its dreams. Beneath that endless white, within the roots of the ancient weirwood, two remained: the boy who would remember, and the shadow of the man who had once been called Bloodraven. The pale figure sat motionless upon his wooden throne, his body fused with the roots that encased him. The flesh of his face was half bark now, the last vestiges of man slowly yielding to the will of the tree. Only one sign of life remained: the faint glimmer of the red eye that still burned in the hollow of his skull. Bran Stark sat before him, cloaked in fur and silence, his breath a pale mist in the cold air. Mira Reed slept nearby, wrapped in a wolfskin blanket, her head resting upon her knees. The fire had long since died, for it no longer kept the cold at bay. Here, in this place of shadows and memory, warmth was a dream. When Bran opened his eyes, he saw not the cavern, but the forest beyond it. He had learned to travel through the weirwood song, to let his spirit drift upon its roots. He moved between trees as a bird might fly between clouds, each branch a pathway, each leaf a door. He saw the ghosts of ages long dead, kings crowned beneath moonlight, wolves howling before the first hearths, giants walking where castles would one day stand. And sometimes he saw the pale face of Bloodraven watching from afar, as if the old man were both master and prisoner of the same dream. "Do you see it now?" The whisper would come, soft as falling snow. "Yes," Bran would answer within the vision. "I see everything." But the old man's voice would grow colder. "Not everything. Not yet." In the waking world, Bran grew thin and pale. His eyes darkened with the knowledge he carried, his youth fading like mist before the dawn. Mira saw the change and feared it, though she did not say so aloud. One night, as the snow fell thicker than ever, she said, "We have been here too long. The world beyond is dying. We should go south before the cold takes us too." Bran turned to her, his gaze distant. "There is no south, not anymore. There is only what must be remembered." "You sound like him," she said bitterly, nodding toward the throne. "He was right," Bran murmured. "If the world forgets what it was, it can never be what it should." She reached for his hand, her eyes full of tears. "And what of you, Bran Stark of Winterfell? Will you stay here until you turn to wood as he did?" "I do not know," he said quietly. "Perhaps that is my road." That night, Bran dreamed of the wall. He saw it stretch across the world like a wound frozen in place. Upon its battlements stood men in black, their torches flickering weakly against the endless dark. But beyond the wall, he saw movement, white shapes gliding through the storm, silent and relentless. He felt their presence as he had felt the old gods in the trees, cold, patient, ancient. The others were coming. When he woke, Bloodraven's eye was upon him. "You have seen them," the old man whispered. "Yes," Bran said. "They are marching." "Their march has never ceased," said Bloodraven. "It only waited for the world to forget, but you will not forget. That is why you were brought here." "What must I do?" "Remember," Bloodraven said again, "and when the time comes, act." Bran frowned. "How will I know when that is?" "You will feel it," the old man murmured, his voice fading like a dying fire. "The roots will tell you." The seasons passed without count. The snow above grew heavier, the sky darker. The world slept, but beneath the roots the dreams deepened. Bran's visions came more swiftly now, so swiftly that he could scarcely tell waking from sleep. He saw the wall crumble in his dreams, and the Black Brothers fleeing before the storm. He saw dragons wheeling through the skies of the far south, their wings shadowing cities of fire. He saw the faces of those yet unborn, heroes and monsters both, each bound to the same endless circle of death and rebirth. One vision lingered longer than the rest, a great weirwood tree burning in a field of snow. From its ashes rose a single green shoot, trembling in the wind. He felt the old man's voice echo through him. This is how it ends, and how it begins again. When he opened his eyes, Bloodraven's body was still at last. The red eye had gone dark. The roots that bound him no longer pulsed with life. Only the ravens stirred, shifting restlessly among the branches. Bran rose and stood before the throne. "Is he gone?" Mira asked softly. "No," Bran said. "He's everywhere now." The roots around the old man's corpse seemed to whisper as if in answer. The sound filled the cavern, a low murmur that grew and grew until it was almost like the beating of a heart. Bran felt it in his chest. It was not fear he felt, nor grief, but something deeper, a vast and quiet understanding. He reached out and touched one of the roots. The moment his fingers brushed the bark, warmth flooded through him and the world opened wide once more. He saw Bloodraven, no longer as he was, but as he had become, a spirit of the forest, a whisper among the trees, a memory too deep for death. And he heard the words again. Remember. They stayed a little while longer, until the food was gone and the cold grew too fierce to bear. One morning, Mira packed their few belongings and said, "We can't stay here, Bran. The world won't wait." He nodded. "Then we'll go, but not south. Not yet." "Where then?" "Where the song is still being written," he said. "We must find it." They left the cavern as the sun rose faintly over the endless white. Bran turned once to look back, and he thought he saw the face of Bloodraven carved anew in the weirwood, its red eyes gleaming softly in farewell. Then the snow swallowed them, and the forest fell silent once more. Far beneath, in the deep heart of the roots, the memory that was once Bryndon Rivers stirred. Through the eyes of ravens and trees, he watched the boy and the girl vanish into the wilderness. The old magic pulsed around him, slow and eternal. The world forgets, he thought, as the light dimmed. But it will learn again. It always does. And somewhere in that vast and frozen stillness, a single raven took flight, its wings carrying the echo of his last words into the dawn. The snows swallowed the world whole. Mountains vanished beneath drifts as tall as towers, rivers froze in their courses, and the wind sang through the bones of trees long dead. To men, it was the long night once foretold in half-forgotten tales, when the sun faltered and hope grew thin as a dying ember. But to Bran Stark, walking north beneath the cold stars, it was the beginning of something older, a remembering of the world before it had forgotten itself. He walked not as other men did. The roots and branches guided his steps. The trees whispered the path ahead. Mira Reed trudged beside him, her spear in hand, her eyes hollow with weariness, yet her resolve unbroken. Their food was gone, their strength waning, but they pressed onward, following a trail no mortal eye could see. Sometimes, when Bran's body could go no farther, his mind flew beyond it. He rode the wind through ravens' wings, soaring above the endless white. From those high paths, he saw the land as it truly was, a vast graveyard, littered with the ruins of men and the frozen bones of beasts. Fires burned here and there, small and lonely, where the last of humankind huddled against the dark. Beyond those fires, in the farthest reaches of the night, he saw another light, cold, blue, and cruel. It moved like the tide, sweeping south. Wherever it passed, the world turned still. When he returned to himself, he would shiver, and Mira would see the fear in his eyes, though he said nothing. One night they sheltered in the hollow of an ancient oak. The air was sharp with frost. Their breath hung in clouds. Bran's limbs were numb, his strength nearly gone. "We can't go farther," Mira said, her voice cracking. "The cold will take us before dawn." Bran stared into the dark beyond their little fire. The wind moved like a living thing through the forest, bending the trees until they groaned. "They're coming," he murmured. Mira looked up sharply. "Who?" "The ones who bring the night." Her hand tightened on her spear. "Then we must move." But Bran only shook his head. "No, we can't flee from them. We must remember them. That is what he taught me." "Bloodraven?" He nodded. "He said the world forgets. That's why the dead walk again, because no one remembers how they were stopped before." "Then what do we do?" she asked. Bran gazed upward, where the faint outline of a weirwood's pale branches rose above them. "We remind the world." He reached out a trembling hand toward the roots beside him. "Help me," he whispered, and the wood seemed to shiver under his touch. His mind slipped from his body like a leaf on the wind. He sank deep into the earth, through roots and veins of frozen sap, until the darkness opened around him, and the song of the weirwoods filled his ears. It was an ancient music, vast and sorrowful, the heartbeat of the world itself. Through it he saw visions, snatches of what was and what might yet be. The wall, cracked and crumbling under a tide of ice. The citadel of Old Town, its tower aflame. Kings falling like leaves in autumn, and dragons crying out across a blood-red sky. And beyond it all, he saw the cold. The White Walkers marching through the snows, their pale eyes burning with the light of endless winter. Yet among them, he sensed something more, a memory buried deep within their chill. Something human and broken, he understood then. They were not only death, they were remembrance twisted by time. The first men had made them, bound them, and forgotten. The world's sin had come home to claim its due. All must remember, the trees whispered, or all will fall. Bran felt the power gather around him like a rising tide. The faces in the weirwoods stirred. The ravens in distant forests took wing. Through every leaf and branch, his voice began to spread, not loud, but deep, a whisper carried upon the wind. He showed the truth to the world as only the Greenseers could. The march of the dead, the breaking of the wall, the fire and shadow that would meet at the world's end. Dreams came to kings, to children, to warriors and priests. Some woke screaming, others wept, but all remembered. When Bran returned to himself, Mira was shaking him by the shoulders. "Wake up, the ground is moving." He opened his eyes. The forest was alive. Snow fell in sheets, but the trees swayed not with the wind, but with purpose. Their branches bent toward one another, roots shifting beneath the frozen soil. A deep hum filled the air, the song of the weirwoods, louder now, stronger. "They've heard me," Bran whispered. The blue glow was visible through the trees now, creeping closer. Mira pulled him to his feet. Then they'd best act quickly. The first of the dead emerged from the dark, a man-shaped thing of ice and bone, its eyes cold as stars. Mira threw her spear, shattering it, but 3 more came. She seized Bran's arm, half dragging him back. Then the forest screamed. The trees groaned as one, their roots ripping free from the frozen earth. Pale limbs struck like spears, crushing the dead where they stood. The air filled with the scent of sap and frost, and the crackle of breaking ice. The weirwoods themselves had woken. Bran could hear them now, not in his mind alone, but in the world. Their voices rose in a great chorus, ancient and terrible. The forest fought. When at last the light faded, silence fell once more. Mira knelt beside Bran, trembling with exhaustion. Around them lay only shattered ice and broken wood. The blue glow was gone. "Did we?" she began, but her voice failed. Bran's eyes were closed, his face calm. "Not ended," he said softly, "only delayed. The cold will come again, but now the world will remember." He reached toward the nearest tree, his fingers brushing its bark. "And so will I." The roots stirred beneath his touch. The ground opened slightly, a hollow forming. Mira stared at him, horrified. "No, Bran, don't. It must be done," he said gently. "The world needs a watcher. Someone must remain." She caught his hand, tears freezing on her cheeks. "You'll die." He smiled faintly. "Not die. Change." And before she could stop him, he sank to his knees beside the weirwood. The roots reached out to him, curling around his legs, his waist, his chest. He felt no pain, only a deep, encompassing peace. The last thing he saw was Mira's face, lit by the faint red glow of the heart tree. "Go," he whispered. "Tell them to remember." Then the forest closed around him. When the storm passed, Mira Reed was gone, vanished into the snows. Only the grove remained, still and silent. In its heart stood a new tree, young yet strong, its bark pale as bone, its leaves red as spilled blood. Through its roots, the land began to dream again, and somewhere, far beneath the world, two voices whispered together, one old, one young, bound by memory. The watch continues, the world remembers, the years passed, and the snows began to melt. The long night that had blanketed the world withdrew like a beast returning to its den, leaving behind only silence and ruin. Rivers broke their frozen chains, forests shuddered back to life, and smoke rose once more from the hearths of men. Yet the scars of winter were carved deep. Whole kingdoms had been swallowed by ice and hunger. Castles stood empty. Songs were sung of ghosts and gods, and the names of the dead were whispered like prayers. And far to the north, beyond the wall, beyond even the memory of most men, there stood a forest where the trees were pale as bone and the leaves red as blood. In its heart grew a young weirwood unlike any other, its face newly carved, its eyes shining faintly crimson in the dusk. The wildlings who dared wander close spoke of it with awe and fear. They said the tree watched them, that it whispered their names as they slept. Some claimed it bore the likeness of a boy, though none could say whose. They did not know that beneath its roots, deep in the heart of the earth, the memory of Bran Stark lingered, the boy who had become the Watcher, the last greenseer of the age. In those days, the living began to creep north again. They came in small bands at first, scouts, hunters, and outlaws, seeking what the snows had hidden. Among them was an old woman wrapped in a black cloak, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes dark with grief and fire. She carried no weapon save a short knife of bone and the scars of 100 journeys. Her name was Mira Reed. She had wandered long since that night when the forest had awakened, and Bran had vanished into its roots. For years she had searched for a purpose in a world that had forgotten him, but the dreams would not let her rest. Again and again, she saw his face in her sleep, the boy she had carried through storm and shadow, calling her name from the depths of the weirwood song. At last, she followed the dream north once more, past the ruins of the wall and into the wild lands of frost and silence. The path was hard, yet she felt the forest guide her, as if every step had already been taken in some age long before. After many days, she came upon the grove. The weirwood stood waiting, its red leaves stirring though there was no wind. For a long while she said nothing. Then she sank to her knees before it. "Bran," she whispered. The tree's face seemed to soften. A voice, faint as breath through leaves, answered her. "You came back." Tears welled in her eyes. "I could not do otherwise." The air trembled with a low hum, like the heartbeat of the world. "The world remembers," said the voice. "The cold is gone for now, but it will come again. It always does. I have no place in it anymore," she murmured. "All I loved is gone." The branches above her stirred, shedding crimson leaves that fell like rain upon her hair. "Not gone," said the voice. "Changed, as all things must." She closed her eyes. "Then let me rest, Bran. I am tired." "Rest, then," whispered the leaves, "and remember." When she died, the forest claimed her gently. Her body sank into the roots, and in time a small sapling rose beside the weirwood, slender, with leaves the color of dusk. The two trees twined together, their branches touching, whispering to one another in the wind. The wildlings who found the grove afterward built a circle of stones around it. They called the place the Lovers' Trees and left offerings of carved wood and wildflowers at its base. Generations passed. The wall was forgotten, its ruins swallowed by moss and snow. The kingdoms of men rose again in the south. New kings, new wars, new songs. Yet north of the world's end, the trees watched and remembered. Through their roots, the green seer's spirit flowed. He saw the march of time as one might watch waves upon the shore. He saw the cities rebuilt, the dragons return, the great wheel turn once more. Each age brought its fire, its blood, its peace. Each ended as the last had ended. But through it all, the memory endured. Sometimes, in the quiet years, travelers came from distant lands seeking wisdom. They had heard tales of the trees that whispered, of dreams that spoke with human tongues. Some left gifts, others prayers. Few received answers, yet all felt the presence in the grove, a gaze both kind and terrible, old as the roots themselves. One night, long after even the memory of Winterfell had faded into myth, a boy wandered into the forest. He was small and ragged, with eyes the color of summer sky. His people were wanderers of the north, living by the spear and the snare. He had followed a dream that drew him through storm and shadow to the red trees. He stood before the heart tree and whispered, "Is this where the old gods live?" The wind stirred the leaves, and in the sound he thought he heard laughter, soft, familiar, full of love. He reached out and touched the bark. The world seemed to open before him. He saw flashes of the past, a boy and a wolf, a girl with a spear, an old man with one red eye. He saw the wall rise and fall, the world die and bloom again. He saw the circle of time, unbroken. When the vision ended, he fell to his knees, gasping. "Who are you?" he whispered. The voice came from the earth and sky together. A watcher, a dreamer, a friend. The boy's heart swelled with wonder. "Can you teach me?" The leaves rustled again. "Only if you remember." Seasons turned. The boy grew into a man, and he taught his children to honor the trees and listen to their whispers. In time, his people became keepers of the grove, protectors of the sacred wood. They learned to speak with ravens and read the wind. They called themselves the children of the North Wind, though few understood the name. And though the world changed, though kings rose and fell, and empires came and went, the song of the trees endured. Through storm and fire, through shadow and snow, the voice of the green seer whispered still. Remember the light in the long night. Remember the bond of blood and leaf. Remember the truth that never dies. Far beneath the roots, where time and death had lost their meaning, the spirits of the watchers waited. Brynden Rivers, the last of the dragon's bastards, and Bran Stark, the boy who had flown, sat side by side in the silence between ages. Above them, the world turned, and the song continued. Bloodraven's voice, soft as falling snow, broke the stillness. "Do you see it, boy? The endless circle?" Bran smiled faintly. "I see it, and I remember." The light of the weirwoods flared brighter for a moment, painting the cavern in red and gold. The sound of ravens filled the air, millions of wings beating in time with the world's heart. And beyond the forest, where men still dreamed of glory and fear, the wind carried their whisper through the ages. The watch continues. The world remembers. And from memory, life begins anew. The tale of the green seer and the blood of dragons drifted through the ages like mist on the northern wind. Centuries passed, yet the story endured, woven into the songs of wanderers and the carvings upon old stones. The world itself seemed to breathe it, though few living souls knew the truth of what they whispered. In the far north, the forest still stood. The weirwoods grew vast and silent. their pale trunks rising like frozen sentinels against the gray sky. Among them, the twin trees, the lovers' trees, had become a legend. They were said to murmur to one another when the moon was full, their voices soft as falling snow. No axe had ever touched them, no fire had dared to burn near their roots. The wildlings who roamed those lands told strange tales by their hearths. They spoke of the Watcher beneath the roots, a ghost who guarded the realm of the living from the dead, and of the dreamer in the trees, whose eyes saw all that was and all that would come. Some said they were gods. Others said they were the memories of men too great to die. Few believed, yet when the storms howled and the dead winds blew down from the far ice, every man and woman in the north bent their knee to the trees and whispered the same prayer. Remember us. The ages of men came and went. The world ripened, withered, and bloomed again. New kings rose from the ashes of the old, their banners bright and bold. Yet beneath all their wars and glories, the roots of the earth held their quiet dominion. Far in the south, in the green valleys of what had once been the riverlands, there grew a child who dreamed of the north. Her name was Alice of Raventree, born beneath a weeping willow that had split an old stone wall with its roots. Her eyes were gray as mist, and her hair dark as a raven's wing. From the moment she could speak, she told stories of snow and wolves, of a boy who flew, and of trees that could talk. Her family laughed at first. "You've your grandsire's fancy, girl," her mother would say. "Forget those northern ghosts." But Alice could not forget. When she slept, she saw them, the weirwoods red and white, the heart tree glowing like a living flame. Sometimes she woke with frost in her hair, though it was summer, and the smell of pine and snow still clung to her clothes. As she grew, her dreams deepened. She began to hear a voice, low and patient, like the rumble of the earth before a storm. "Do you hear the song, child?" it would ask. "Yes," she would whisper in her sleep. "Then follow it." One autumn, when she was 16, a storm swept across the land. The winds tore branches from the trees, and the rivers rose high with rain. Alice woke in the night to find the voice louder than ever, calling her name. She rose, dressed, and left her house without a sound. The storm did not touch her. The rain fell around her like a veil, but her steps were sure, her path clear. For many days she walked north, guided by dreams. Villages came and went. She crossed rivers, climbed hills, and wandered through the ruins of castles swallowed by moss. She never tired. The voice was always there, leading her farther into the wild. When she reached the lands where men no longer built roads, she found the trees growing taller and older. The air smelled of frost, and the nights were alive with the sound of ravens. At last, after many weeks, she came upon a clearing in the heart of the forest. There, beneath a sky pale with dawn, stood the twin weirwoods, the lovers' trees, grown mighty and terrible in their beauty. Their roots were one, their branches entwined. The faces carved into their trunks looked down upon her with eyes of living red. Alice fell to her knees. "I have come," she said, though she did not know why. The wind stilled. The leaves whispered. "You have come far, child of rivers and memory," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Who speaks?" she asked, trembling. "Those who remember, those who wait. Do you know your name?" "I am Alice of Raventree." "No," the voice said. "You are more. You carry our song in your blood. The world forgets, as it always does. It must remember again. What would you have me do?" The trees stirred. Leaves fell around her like crimson snow. "Take the memory south once more. The roots sleep, but men must wake. carry our song to the world of fire and tell them that the long night comes again." Alice felt the words burn within her like a brand. Visions filled her mind. The walls shattered and rebuilt. A city of dragons reborn in flame, shadows gathering beneath a blood-red moon. She saw faces of those not yet born, heroes and tyrants alike, their fates bound together in the turning of the world. When she woke from the vision, the clearing was silent. The trees watched her still, but their eyes were calm. She rose, her heart full of purpose. She bowed her head. "I will remember." The wind sighed through the leaves like a sigh of relief. Alice returned to the south and became a wanderer, a teller of tales. She sang of the watchers in the roots, of the boy who flew, of the forest that fought the night. People laughed at her stories, but when winter came early, or the dead wind howled across the hills, even the skeptics lit fires and whispered prayers to the trees. Children grew up knowing her songs. When she died, they buried her beneath a young heart tree that had sprouted where none had grown before. Its bark was smooth and white, and its eyes shone red as sunset. And thus, the memory lived on. Far away in the deep earth beneath the north, the old spirit stirred. Bloodraven opened his unseen eyes. "She has done well," he said, his voice echoing through the hollow. Beside him, Bran's light flickered faintly. "The circle turns again." "Yes," said the elder, "as it always will." Above them, the roots pulsed like veins. Through them, the whisper spread once more, through soil and stone, through rivers and trees, through the hearts of those who would dream again. The watch continues, the world remembers, and from memory the fire shall rise once more. The forest shivered, and the night was full of the sound of wings. The snows had long since melted, and the world that rose from beneath them was not the same as the one that had vanished beneath winter's grasp. Rivers, once frozen, ran swift and full again, feeding valleys thick with grass. Forests stretched where battlefields had been, and the old ruins of men slumbered under moss and ivy. The kingdoms that remained were smaller, humbler, their lords mindful of the tales whispered by firelight, the tales of the long night and the watcher beneath the roots. Yet even in peace, memory faded. New songs replaced the old. The deeds of kings grew louder in men's mouths than the quiet heroism of those who had lived and died to save them. The watch was forgotten again, as it always was, but the land itself remembered. Far to the north, beneath the pale glow of an unsetting sun, the forest endured. The twin weirwoods, the lovers' trees, towered above the canopy, their branches woven together like the fingers of clasped hands. Beneath them, the earth breathed softly. The roots pulsed with life, drawing dreams and whispers from deep within the soil where the last green seers slept. Among those whispers was the faint echo of a voice, ageless and calm. The circle turns once more. The roots trembled as if in answer, and a faint tremor ran through the trees. Leaves stirred where no wind blew, and ravens took flight, dark wings cutting across the pale sky. In those years, the world below had forgotten the old ways, but not all hearts were blind to them. In a small village on the edge of the northern wilds, a boy named Cregan was born beneath the shadow of a great oak. He was a quiet child, more given to wandering the woods than to play. When the villagers spoke of him, they called him strange, half in jest, half in fear, for he would speak to the trees as though they were listening. "They do listen," he once told his mother. "They remember everything." His mother would smile, though uneasily. "That's just the wind, my son." But the wind, Cregan thought, did not answer back. By the time he reached his 10th year, He had begun to dream of the north. Dreams of snow that glowed red, of trees with faces, of a voice that called his name through the roots of the world. He would wake with frost upon his breath and the distant cry of ravens in his ears. One night, the dream changed. He saw a man with hair white as snow, sitting upon a throne of wood. A red eye burned in the hollow of his face, but it was not cruel. It was sad, patient, eternal. "Do you know me?" the voice asked. Cregan nodded in his sleep. "You are the Watcher." The man inclined his head. "And you are the next. The world forgets again. It must be reminded." When Cregan woke, he knew what he must do. He left his home before dawn, following the northern star. The land grew wilder as he traveled, the air colder. Rivers turned to ice beneath his feet. Wolves shadowed him but did not strike, as if some unseen command stayed their hunger. At last, he came to the edge of a vast forest, the same that had once sheltered Bran Stark and the Greenseers before him. The trees were ancient, their roots thick with moss, their branches stretching to blot out the sun. Cregan stepped into their shadow and felt the world change. The silence there was alive. The wind carried voices too soft to be heard, the scent of snow and old blood. As he walked deeper, he saw faces in the bark, stern and sorrowful, yet welcoming. At the heart of the forest, he found the twin weirwoods. They were greater than any living thing he had ever seen, their limbs locked together in eternal embrace. The ground beneath them glowed faintly red, and the air hummed like the breath of a sleeping god. Cregan fell to his knees. "I am here," he said. The leaves rustled, and the forest answered. "You have come far, child of men. Do you remember?" "I don't know," he whispered, "but I will try." The branches swayed, their motion slow and deliberate. A single crimson leaf drifted down, landing in his open hand. The moment it touched his skin, warmth surged through him, fire and frost together. He saw flashes of memory that were not his own. A boy and his direwolf, an old man with one red eye, a woman kneeling before a heart tree as snow fell upon her hair, and beneath it all, the voice of the Watcher. "The world is a circle, Cregan of the Southwind. What was forgotten must be found again. You are its memory now." The light dimmed. The wind grew still. Cregan lifted his head to find the clearing empty. The voices had faded, yet their echo lingered in his heart. He knew what he must do. Cregan returned to the south with the voice still whispering in his mind. He became a wanderer, traveling from village to village, telling the stories he had seen. He spoke of Bran the Dreamer and Bloodraven the Shadow, of the long night and the trees that had once fought beside men. At first, they mocked him, calling him mad, but when the winters grew longer and the stars dimmer, people began to listen. He taught them to plant trees where the forests had been felled, to carve faces in the oldest trunks, to whisper their prayers to the roots instead of the skies. Slowly, the old faith took root again. The years passed, and the boy became a man, his hair silvered by frost and time. Yet still he wandered, spreading the word of remembrance. Wherever he went, the ravens followed, their wings dark against the sun. When at last his strength failed, he returned to the forest that had called him. The snow fell thick upon his shoulders as he knelt before the twin trees. "I have done as you asked," he said. "The world remembers." The branches above him stirred, shedding a rain of red leaves. "Well done, child of men," the voice murmured. "Rest now. The watch is eternal." He smiled as his eyes closed, and when the dawn came, a new sapling stood where he had fallen, pale and slender, its leaves bright as fire. Far beneath the roots, The old spirit stirred once more. Brynden Rivers lifted his gaze toward the surface. "Another has taken his place," he said. Bran's light glimmered beside him. "The song continues." "Yes," said Bloodraven, "and though the world forgets, the trees do not." Above, the forest whispered. The wind carried the murmur southward, across mountains and rivers, through cities and ruins, until it reached even the farthest corners of the realm. And those who dreamed that night awoke with a strange stillness in their hearts and the faint scent of pine upon the air. They did not know why, but they spoke a single word aloud before sleep claimed them again. Remember. The roots of the world pulsed once, deep and strong, and the forest breathed. The watch continued, the memory endured, and through that remembrance, the realm of men was bound once more to the gods of earth and shadow. The circle had closed and begun anew.